important to us that we get caught trying. Especially knowing that the Pacific Northwest currently does not have a quantum initiative the way other states do, and knowing that like the qubits folks, like I think they were right to bet on us. And Johnny and I are working very hard to prove them right, and we're trying to like connect with all the builders and believers and backers who are going to do that. Because like you said, sometimes people outside of this area believe in us more than we believe in ourselves.
Are y'all doing anything like the Washington State Department of Commerce or Washington State government in general?
So that's a great question. So there's been a bit of a shakeup, as you may have heard, at the Commerce Office, where they're doing like a bit of restructuring and all that. That said, there is a Quantum Nexus group that looks like it's going to get rebooted. That's going to focus on some of this private, public, and academic institution partnership. And we got that announcement this past week at the Quantum panel. GeekWire did an article about both that panel and the space panel. From this past week. So what we're hearing is that we're going to have some ecosystem partners and opportunity. That one is focused like primarily on quantum. So we're really excited to hear that. We heard that there might be like a bit of a working group here in Washington State on that. So we're optimistic. We definitely want to participate as much as we can. As I mentioned before, the folks on our board, they've helped countries, nation states, as well as some of these other states who have quantum initiatives. So we would love to see us get on the map that way.
So how do y'all balance like gut instinct versus data when deciding to invest in a founder?
It's interesting because like the data kind of bears out the instincts in some ways, right? To the extent that data can capture it, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. So it's interesting you asked this question because my fun partner and mentor, we were talking about this, about like kind of like our frameworks that we use, not just like around diligence, but around fit, fit for our fund, fit for our thesis and all of that. And so I will say this, one of the things that for the folks who are kind of advancing, so to speak, in our consideration process, because our goal is to be proactive in getting this pipeline and working with folks so that when the fund is ready, we have a very clear idea who we can go to the table with, who we want to make offers to. And one of the things that seems to be the through line is that the data rooms for these folks and like their tenacity around their subject matter is really solid, but they're very like humble and honest and clear about what help they need on the business side, right? So they'll be like, I know this about biotech, or I know this about space, or I know this about whatever, but the reason I am interested in funding advisors, adding you to my cap table is because here are my clients that I want to sell to. Here's how I know I need help with scale and traction. Here's where I want to integrate some of these future technologies into my roadmap. So one of the challenges, and I noticed this like when I was in grants at Miston, is people can get so into like their pitch being like, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, that they forget to answer the question, well, if it's that great, why do you need my money? Right? But what I've noticed is that the folks who we've been working with and evaluating is they're like, hey, this is what we've done. This is the potential. This is what I need, and this is what I'm looking for to help realize that potential in market.
So let me ask you this, right? So you're a pretty new firm, like just started in February. So how do you convince a startup to use you, right? Suppose a startup has like 3 or 4 options. How do you convince a startup, no, come use us. We're brand new, but we can add this value to you. What's your pitch on that?
Well, is it a startup looking for us on the design partnership side or on the cap table side?
We'll say cap table.
On the cap table. Well, I think one different, let's say they've passed all of our checks and like we're really interested and they're like, give me your pitch. I think the short pitch would be, if you want pipeline and revenue, we're not here to put you in an accelerator or incubator. We're here to put you into a monetized ecosystem of innovation, traction, and scale. I think that would be our primary message is like, hey, we're here for your traction, right? If you have us on your cap table, not only do we have the whole family of Qubits Ventures and the portfolio companies and cross-sell, upsell opportunities, but we also have this advisory side. We also have this design partner side where, I'll give you an example. There was a interesting sort of thing that's kind of emerged where I was talking to somebody like you who was asking me about this. And they work at a large consulting firm. And I told him about one of the prospects I was really excited about. And he said, hey, can I talk to him? Because I actually might have a contract and a pilot for him right now with the state customer. And I introduced them and he was like, hey, can you be under NDA, et cetera, right? So the thing about it was, even in the early stages of us talking, it's like, I'm bringing him business and doing like this business development. just by considering them, for our cohort. And I do think that that's a very big differentiator because, I'll leave it to Nardo and the Qubits folks to connect you with more investors. But in terms of like connecting you with revenue and customers, which we tend to find, you get a lot more money longer time from customers for things they want from you than from investors in perpetuity, right? I think that tends to be like our biggest differentiator, even this early in.
Okay. Can you tell me what something called complexity theory is?
Complexity theory, is that related to the deep tech?
I think so, yeah. Okay,
so, well, is this the complexity theory that has like what's related to like total readiness levels?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Okay, so if I'm correct on what you're referring to, so complexity level kind of, you're supposed to crosswalk complexity and kind of like what's called total readiness levels to portfolio thesis and time horizon, right? So the complexity theory says the more complex something is, the more time and money it's going to take. And so from a deep tech perspective, you want to be very clear, both from managing the expectations of like your founder and all that, but also like, Nardo calls it patient capital, right? You have to have a plan around patient capital if you want to get in with some things that kind of operate around the complexity theory. Another part of the complexity theory says the more complex the tool or solution is, the harder it is to sell it. Not just to get investors in on it, but it also can be harder to sell. We encounter that a lot in deep tech. I mean, I encountered that. I've literally, so much of my career in emerging tech, Jason, has been trying to be like an interlocutor between like experts who understand the complexity of the thing that they're trying to do and end users who like, you lost me. I call that the expert end user gap, because the thing is, whether it's an expert in quantum, data center, software engineering, AI, the more that an expert establishes credibility through their expertise, leaning into that expertise is going to be the thing that makes you lose your end users along the way. And so that can be another way complexity theory plays out, is because even if you're like, can somebody come explain this complexity to me? Then you're right back. Now, I'll give people some tidbits here. 3 things I'll tell people, I don't care what form of tech you're in, deep tech, whatever. Check with procurement, check with cybersecurity, and check with a salesperson. Procurement, why? Because let's say you get to yes with the VP at whatever enterprise or this department, whatever. People still have to go through budget and approval processes. They still have to go through procurement. They still have to go through fiscal year stuff and all of that. A lot of startups out there have this addressable market sort of thing, and they know they have to like go through the enterprise gauntlet, but they actually have done very little work to understand the procurement and purchasing cycles of the companies they're trying to sell to. So definitely do your homework on that part too. The second part would be around cybersecurity, CISOs. So many things with AI right now. Remember I told you that Gartner study? They're getting killed on this right now. They are not getting proof of production because like they're not SOC this, they're not ISO this. Because in startup land, everybody's like, you don't need to get ISO certified until you're Series B. I literally heard somebody say that a few years ago, and I was just like, well, it depends on who you're selling to and what you're selling, right? And so there's some of this AI stuff that's kind of like trying to use that approach. It's like, oh, you definitely needed to be a lot more CISO security ready before you try to include those folks in your kind of like pipeline, right? So that's another one, is ask those people like, what would it take to get this approved into production? And the third one, a salesperson. Go talk to somebody who sells for Microsoft, who sells for Amazon, who sells for EY, Deloitte, who's a Microsoft partner, whoever, in the ecosystem for AWS, and ask them, how could a Salesforce sell the thing that your startup has made? Because a lot of people, they talk to a salesperson, they're like, okay, if you can't explain it to me where I can go sell and get a commission off of it, you got some work to do.
So next, I think you might already answer some, but talk about the raw materials needed for this, and like, can you talk to like maybe the supply chain of making this stuff?
So one thing, I'll defer to the experts on this, but I can tell you a few things about it. It's interesting that you bring that up because part of the Qubits Venture Studio strategy, so we're a commercialization focused venture studio, they are looking to develop raw materials venture studios. Because what they're trying to do is build out the links of the supply and the value chain for these things. So what does that mean? Now, my commercialization thing, all the stuff I've been sharing with you, research, roadmap, revenue, like that's kind of like our thing. For raw materials, they got to look at rights. They got to look at excavation. They got to look at so many other complexities. They got to look at tariffs now. They got to look at customs. They got to look at global partnerships. So that raw materials venture studio thing, and even materials discovery, right? Because there's all kinds of things coming out with that. that's going to require a whole different level of expertise and thinking. But I'm really grateful to the folks at Qubits that they are planning for that, because that tends to be another place where a lot of portfolios on deep tech are a bit unhedged. And I'm glad that we have that as part of our planning cycle.
Is there anything that quantum computing will not impact in the future?
I'm going to say, you mean in the digital world?
The war period.
I'll say within the digital world, there won't be anything, and that's because of Shor's algorithm, right? Like that whole Q day sort of thing, like that is very much a thing. I think that is what makes quantum a bit different from innovation, right? Because you can say like AI is here, take it or leave it, right? In quantum, there is no leaving it, because every bad actor, and I'm going to be very clear, the bad actors who are trying to pull off this Q day sort of hack, this whole harvest now, decrypt later, which is like this whole thing where folks are using vulnerabilities right now to take encrypted data. They can't encrypt it yet, but they're storing it, they're harvesting it now because they anticipate being able to crack it open later. There's a lot of that going on right now. That's part of why that quantum VPN company is working with DARPA and all these other folks, because they're trying to secure communications, they're trying to secure things so they can't be harvested for later decryption. That's why I say there's no take it or leave it here, because if you're the bad guy, you're not going to go to D-Wave or a Getty or IonQ and like, hey, I'd like to put in a formal order. No. What you're going to do is, like, even before Q-Day, you're going to run quantum simulations on how to mess with these AI tools. You're going to see like where data is leaking. You're going to mess with this stuff that's been vibe coded, right? Because you're a bad guy. You don't care about people's roadmaps and what they believe about quantum chips, right? Like, if there's something out there for you to hack with, you're going to go hack with it, right? So that's why I say, like, in the digital world, there won't be anything, because if there is any sort of prize, any sort of monetary value tied to your data and your privacy, which there is, in a way where people can kind of have these next-gen Trojan horses, next-gen ransomware, all of that, they're going to go for it. And so, and I still don't think we talk nearly enough about how AI tools are also being used for hacks.
Yeah, definitely. How scared should the regular person be about getting hacked every day?
You know, I'm not sure if that's a fear thing or like so much of a savvy thing. Like for example, like car accidents. It's less that I'm concerned that there could be a car accident, so to speak, with your data and privacy in the digital world. My main concern is that we don't have seatbelts. Right, like, you know, we're
still driving around like we're driving around the 1950s, 1970s.
Yeah, and that's, once again, I'm not saying that, like, you know, all these platforms don't have a baseline of security somewhere, but what I am saying is that, like, there's this. I go back to cars, right? Because cars have safety features built into them, but typically the American end user, and particularly the American end user, so the car company put a seatbelt in there. That doesn't mean people wear their seatbelt.
Yeah.
They put a turn signal in there.
Definitely not in the state of Washington.
People are not using their
especially
turn
not in the
signals.
Seattle, Washington area.
Right? So there's a degree of this where, like, the car maker themselves, just like with cars, they need to put in a baseline of safety, airbags, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's the thing that the driver needs to do. And so that's kind of my concern with cybersecurity, is that, like, should you be, like, worried about the cybersecurity boogeyman? It's like, I would say, like, know how to drive your car, you know, don't volunteer all this information, right? Know how to put on your seatbelt, know how to use your turn signal, know what that means for yourself in the digital world. I talk to parents a lot about this, because they talk about their kids' screen time, and then, like, you look at their screen time app and it's like,
yeah.
Or they're like, I'm worried about my kids' security filters, and, like, their Instagram privacy filters are a wreck. There are people on Venmo who still don't have private transactions.
I don't understand that. I use Venmo once in a while,